Om Nicho Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastam Yenu Pashanti Diraha Tesham Shanti Shashvati Netaresham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. That one, the wise ones realize, is dwelling in their own self. To them belong peace, and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. And so the Upanishads, the non-dual scriptures of India, state that one being who is eternal, Nityam, and who is Chetanas, who is pure intelligence, appears in the hearts and minds of the wise ones, but only they get that peace from it. The rest do not seem to recognize it. As Krishna says in the Gita, of thousands of beings, only one strives for perfection. And of thousands of those who strive, scarcely one comes to know me in truth. So maybe unlike many of the movements of today, spiritual movements, who are handing out enlightenment and Brahman as if they were cheap candy, the Upanishads state differently, that it's a very difficult thing to know that Brahman, especially as one's own self. Nevertheless, it's the highest goal of human existence and worth all the time and effort necessary to achieve realization of that innate oneness of divinity within the soul. Brahman and Atman, one thing. Jiva and Shiva, one thing, as the scriptures of different traditions of India tell us. So we set our sights on that. Come sail with me, sail with me. Leave the harbor of mundane human convention. Cast off the lines that bind thee to the shoreline of superficial actions and thoughts. As Ram Prasad sings in his beautiful songs, Mother India. So this invitation to seek that peace, which only the wise ones know what it's like to live in that peace, and it's not hard to find that out when you look out into the exterior world. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, eyes half open, looking in and out at the same time. That's Vishnu yoga. Eyes fully closed, looking inward only, that's Shiva yoga. So in our tradition, we have that, plus we have Divine Mother yoga. We're very fortunate. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is our Vishnu. And Swami Vivekananda is our Shiva. But then we have Sri Sharda Devi, the Holy Mother, the Divine Mother of the universe. She's our Shakti. So we have S, R, and V gathered here. It's widespread numbers, few in attendance, but always appearing here and there to go from place to place and help beings out of darkness. If you only know the truth, the rest will hate and laugh at thee, O great one. But pay thou no heed. Go thou from place to place and help them out of darkness, Maya's chains. Without the fear of pain or the search for pleasure, go beyond them both Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. This is the penultimate verse of the Song of the Sannyasin by Swami Vivekananda has stated so perfectly for us. In that regard, then, we meet as often as we can, even though our numbers are far flung across the world. People I see in front of me right now from Northwest, from Midwest, from Europe, from Iceland, from Hungary, and numbers gathering here together to participate in a universal satsang, celebration of the great master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Deva. He's the one that brought this Samanvaya Mahacharya Yuga Dharma Swarupinam, brought this great collectivity of the different world's religions together. As he used to say, I have practiced all the world's religions and realized their essence. Then I made a bouquet of them, and I offered them at the feet of the Divine Mother of the universe. So that's the greatness of our great master and also of our Vedanta. Madness of love, but with no bondage, as Vivekananda used to quote it. That is our Vedanta. So we have to assess day to day how great that Vedanta is and what it's done for us, what it can do for us, what it will do for us in the near future, and how it has taken away time, ironically, at the same time, that is providing us with all these accesses to various penultimate goals, like freeing ourselves from ignorance and from karmas from the past lifetimes, and helping us to arrive at that penultimate gate of liberation from phenomena called by the seers of ancient India, Kaivalya. So we can distance ourselves from the appearance of things, is what that means in a nutshell. Basically, is that nature has cast a spell upon us, and that nature that came from the thoughts of our mind, and from the thoughts of the great mind, is a display and a play that's going on all the time. And people can take that play and turn it into a series of dreams. The difference between a play and a dream, in other words, between the words lila in Sanskrit and maya or samsara in Sanskrit, is that the play has a curtain going up and down and a silence where the performance ends and the audience still exists. But in the maya, the audience, the spectator goes away, and the phenomena, the events go on, and they drag from birth to death and death to birth to soul in a series of dreams. So at least then we should find our way to and posit ourselves in that divine play, whose main actor we knew is called Ishvara. I was writing a God blog yesterday, as we will see in about 2 hours from now when we look into those, put 5 more up, and was talking about how Swami Vivekananda's mission, his status is Brahman itself. He's just posited in Brahman 100%. But his mission is to introduce all beings in this world to Ishvara, the highest ideal in form that the human mind can comprehend. And then, despite knowing about the emptiness of all phenomena, go on working to help people raise themselves up and out of it. So he has a triple mission there, in which he's so qualified to fulfill. So we look at him with great admiration. He's the great elephant moving through the village of this world with various curs barking at his heels. And as Sri Ramakrishna was to say, Narayan is a perfect man, he said about Swami Vivekananda. So there, not only did we see him in this age, the Kali Yuga, but we had him in our country, of all things, for several years at a time, gave us his full attention. And now we have to turn around and pay not only homage to that great being, but pay him back in terms of the work we do that will net for us the goal of human existence, which he so clearly outlined for us as being not just Kaivalya, which I just mentioned, freedom from nature, but realization of the absolute identity between the apparently individualized soul and the supreme soul, between the Atman and the Paramatman, as the philosophy states. So when we gather in satsang each week, we have high-minded thoughts, we hear profound words, and we share our deepest insights. And yes, if we must, also our feelings. Feelings aren't real big in Vedanta and Buddhism. You might have noticed we tend to be indrawn, quiet, keep ourselves even, and don't let sentimentalism take over or emotionalism. Just the best place to view the changing phenomena of this universe from. That's called witness consciousness, or Sakshi Bhutam. And that's the healthiest position that the apparently individualized soul can assume, is this witness consciousness. And watch that play and the curtain going up and down, no matter how many times it goes up and down each day. And it does so for billions of souls and over billions of ages, because everything is eternal. It's one of the great truths of Vedanta. Everything is eternal. If you were to be able to take out the beginnings, middles, and ends, that is the concept of time from that eternal play, then you'd be this witness standing aloft and aloof from all this phenomena and not identifying with it at all, but seeing it just as maybe somebody might read a book and put it down. Vivekananda once said, opens the front cover, reads pages, page by page, remembers everything that's in the book, and then puts it down. That's the Purusha with the Prakriti. And as the father of yoga said in his Yoga Sutras, if the seer becomes master of the seen, then everything is all right, everything is fine. But if the seen becomes master of the seer, then you've got a problem. And pretty soon everyone believes in what they behold externally only, as you can see that condition in people today. And identifying with the body and senses, which are outward moving and outward manifesting, as the Mundaka Upanishad says. And then forgetting this connection within. Eventually, in Vedanta, you're going to have to go beyond even outside and inside, because they're really one thing. So that's sort of the supreme secret you move towards when you behold the outside and the inside. The lower stages of knowledge, which are actually called stages of ignorance, the soul hasn't yet come to discriminate between the outside and the inside. In other words, only believes there's only an outside. And Sri Ramakrishna has said as much, as well as the philosophy. But over time begins, as stages of knowledge dawn on it, begins to realize that there is something internal that's separate, apparently separate from it. And so it sees the two-ness of everything. And whereas before it was sort of a green coconut oneness, Sri Ramakrishna has said, just one mass of matter, everything thrown into that, including thought and energy. But then it begins to separate and sees the wisdom in discerning between the outside and the inside. And some progress is made along the spiritual path. Then when the outside and the inside are seen as two different worlds, Jagrat and Swapna, that is the waking and the dreaming states, then pretty soon one can begin to fuse them and see that they're simultaneously one at all times. Like placing a stick across a pool of water. All of a sudden it looks like there's two. And then you take the stick away and you realize there's one. Or drawing a line on water, Sri Ramakrishna said, for a few seconds, you'll fall into the illusion that there are two bodies of water. And then all of a sudden the line disappears. That line is the ego that causes this distinction between the inside and the outside. And one wants to behold that from a witness standpoint, watch it disappear, and then return to that state of homogeneity again. That there's just one consciousness, is just one eternal, undivided mass of pure conscious awareness. Ananda Ganam. It's a mass, but it's also a blissful mass. So in the early stages, it's not a blissful mass of consciousness. It's a suffering-prone mass of matter. And one has to step back from that to realize that there is something within. Once my teacher said, here in the West, Christianity has turned into a dualistic religion. Why dualistic? He said, ask himself his own question, why dualistic? Because they believe there's a God inside. But that's no God inside they're worshiping. That's the ego. And so people were sitting and listening to this remarkable statement. First, it sounds like he's an atheist. Of course, first it sounds like Kapila is an atheist. Sounds like Lord Buddha is an atheist. And if you just listen to Swami Vivekananda early days, it sounds like he was an atheist. But then they go on to explain that this outside and this inside are two different worlds, two different divisions, and neither of them are Brahman. Brahman is always one, cannot be turned into two. So this separating the wheat from the chaff, or discriminating between the real and the unreal, been called many things by different souls who have awakened, is necessary to achieve knowledge of this indivisible oneness, which I just chanted about, which is Nicho Nichanam, which is the eternal dwelling among non-eternal things. It's Chetanas Chetananam. It's the intelligence of the most intelligent ones. And it's ever one, and it fulfills the desires of the many. Just those three lines alone are enough to meditate on, really for days, hours at a time, to impress upon oneself the beauty of the Vedanta and how deep it goes, how revelatory it is, even beyond revelation and insight, into what we call self-realization. So maybe some of you have some notes you can share with us about the path of self-realization that you're walking. Are you on it yet? Are you taking stock of the steps you're taking? And can you share it with others? Shed more light on it. We want 1, clarification, 2, then intensification. Usually that's the best order too. Don't intensify things until you're clear about them. So first we shed some light on the matter, and then we roll it over in our minds, reason about it, and then realize. We extract the essence from things and then realize it.
Namaste, Babaji.
Yes. Abhinaya from Hungary.
Stay. I know that you've already
Otherwise,
answered most of my
sit here and think of things
questions
to say, and
already.
I can
but still, I would like to ask about. I've been studying the second chapter of the Gita the Samkhya Yoga, and I would like to know if the Samkhya Yoga that you are teaching, how similar is the Samkhya Yoga that you are teaching to the Samkhya Yoga that is in the second chapter of the Gita? And how should we understand eternity? Because it says in the second chapter that in the 19th verse of the second chapter that that the body is perishable and the soul is eternal in existence. That how we should understand this eternity, and should we understand it in the face of time, or should it be something else? How should we approach this eternity as an aspirant?
Yes, that was the first word I uttered today, Nicho, Nichanam, eternal among non-eternal things. So how are we to understand that? How are we to ferret it out, or get the wheat from the chaff and be able to nourish ourselves? Build our house upon the bedrock instead of on shifting sands. All of those expressions by these great souls have led us to believe that the process of discriminatory wisdom is a very powerful one, and that will lead to intensification of one's efforts to get free from the body, that is, from the body and the senses, which are prone to death, as is said in in the Bhagavad Gita. So the second chapter, to go back and answer your first question, that's just pretty much the same Samkhya Yoga that was there in Kapila's time. Remember, in the Gita, Krishna is going on enumerating, I am the A of Om, and of mountains, I am the Himalayas, and so forth. At one point he says, of great sages, I am Kapila. So it must have been that Lord Kapila pre-existed Sri Krishna, at least in that incarnation. And if we know that Sri Krishna, if they've beginning to dig up the battlefield of Kurukshetra now, making Krishna more a historical personage in the minds of non-believers, because we know he's an eternally existing inward, just as Jesus exists eternally inward, not just outwardly in history. So, and that gets into the whole thing about time, which you're asking about. But if we know that Kapila pre-existed the battlefield of Kurukshetra by several thousand years, then this Samkhya Yoga must go back at least 4,000 or 5,000 years. So in that case, of course, we know that system of philosophy is also eternal. It's called Sanatana Dharma. And it's also called Adi Daiva Vidya. Adi means the original, Daiva means divine, and Vidya means wisdom. So it's the original divine wisdom that was proclaimed in earliest times by this great soul, Lord Kapila, who gave us the 24 cosmic principles, which philosophies for millennia after were following that system. So it really is the eternal divine wisdom, the set of fives that come flowing out of this oneness, by which souls get into all the way down to the five elements, through the five senses, through the fivefold mind, how the soul follows itself into its body that it creates for itself. All of that wisdom is the original wisdom, which is Samkhya Yoga. Samkhya really just means varieties. When Krishna teaches it in the second chapter of the Gita, then you can see how he's enumerating various things for Sri Krishna, for Arjuna, because Arjuna is fallen into a state of abject depression about having to go to war, which is understandable, seeing that some of his relatives are on the opposite side of the battlefield. So Sri Krishna then begins to bring him out of his dejection, Vishada, it's called. Don't forget to read the first chapter before you read the second. So see that that chapter is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. He's in the actual union with depression or dejection. So it shows that even a great warrior like him, faced with something so calamitous as a great war like that, can fall into a state of tamas or darkness, heaviness, and doesn't know what to do, confuses people. So Krishna brings him out of it very nicely by starting to list the varieties. It's just like taking somebody who's, distracted and saying, well, look at this thing. Oh, now look at this. Now look at this. Look at that. You see how that's connected to that? And you just take them out into nature and you start pointing it. See all the leaves on that tree? See how many trees there are? See how many forests there are? See how many worlds there are? Pretty soon, everything in the varieties section of manifestation begins to cause the soul to forget its dejection. It regains its wonder again. Its wonder at how marvelous even nature is, what to speak of the soul. And then through the 18 chapters, Krishna guides him out of depression. Pretty soon, Arjuna is asking questions. What is Adi Daiva? What is Adi Vidya? What is Adi Yagya? What is Adi Bautika? And so forth. And then later on in the Gita, you find him totally interested in all this wisdom that's coming forth. So back in chapter 2 in Samkhya Yoga, Krishna not only enumerated things for him, but he also told him that the soul's birthless and deathless, that we should go out in the battle, and he put it in terms of Arjuna's very position in the world. That is, if you go out on the battlefield, you must know that the Atman within you, a sword cannot cut it, water cannot drown it, a spear cannot pierce it, fire cannot burn it. So all of these things, fire, water, weapons, those are Prakriti. That's Samkhya Yoga and how it enumerates various things. They're all made of the 5 elements and a combination of them. So Sri Krishna is telling him about the difference between his eternal soul, which cannot be pierced or trampled on by a chariot or burned by fire, and then telling him at the same time that the soul is eternal, and all these varieties have actually come from it, has come from the soul. Later on, he'll take on the Vishvarupa Darshanam. That is, he'll give darshan, the darshan of the Supreme Being in form to Arjuna in a great vision. He touches him on the head, and then this great vision comes to Arjuna, and he sees the cosmic form. So further proof of everything that was said back in chapter 2. So you can see how all of these varieties were taken and enumerated for Arjuna out on the battlefield. But of all sages, I am Kapila, he says. So back in the time of Lord Kapila, then Kaivalya had taken all of these and put them into a list of 24 cosmic principles called tattvas. And later on, the father of yoga connected them all and had you meditating upon them. That's something that we would all be here in the world, be very good for people to connect. That is, earth to smell, water to taste, fire to sight, air to touch, ether to hearing. Those are divine combinations that people take for granted. So the senses become separate from the elements. How's that when they are all connected to one another? So you have to reconnect the dots in this age because that ancient divine wisdom has been forgotten. It's not being taught in schools, not being taught in families. It's not being taught in religion. So where are you going to get it? We're very fortunate, again, to have Vivekananda come back to us in this age, take the wisdom of India out of India, because he's the first one that ever did it. It certainly wasn't done by Shankara or others. That was all kept inside of India. So when Vivekananda jumped the ocean, like Hanuman did in old times, and came here to the West, then he brought all of this yogic wisdom with him, and under the umbrella of Vedanta, reacquainted us and caused our memory to begin to remember that these divine connections are to be meditated upon. And then we'll have the connections to move back inside, from the outside to the inside, and then putting the outside and the inside, Bahir Antaram Va, Shankara says, put them all together into one homogeneous reality, as it always is and always was. Then we begin to shed off belief in appearances. That's the business of the yogi and the yogini. Let's see, the man and woman who are awakening is to see through the appearances of nature and of ancestors and of worlds in time and space. So then you go on and you asked about time. The best way to look at that is from a timeless place, because if you look at time from inside of time, you get wrapped in time. And that's what's happened to people who've lost their witness consciousness. So you learn, first of all, that time is an illusion. And it's, where does it come from? Where does it originate from? In the mind. When the mind is in operation, seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years are going by. Lifetimes are even going by if you can think so deep. So that's the passage of time, which isn't really there in deep sleep. It's not really there at death, and it's not really there in samadhi. So where did time go? It must have been in my mind when my mind was connected to the body and the senses. And as soon as it disconnected from the body and senses, time was no longer there. So how real can it be? And so they went on thinking like this. And then they began to examine the timeless state that came upon them when time went away. So people are caught under the press and in the hypnotism of name, form, time, space, and causality, causation. Karma, might as well just call it by Sanskrit name. Those 5 things people are hypnotized by. And those 5 things are what Swami Vivekananda called. Do you know the answer to that?
Maya.
Maya, yeah. That's the first time we got a good definition of Maya from anyone. When people were coming on the scene before Vivekananda came here, like some of the Buddhists and so forth, that were walking from place to place, then the idea about that Maya was an illusion. But Vivekananda said, that's not true. Maya is a statement of fact. It's name, form, time, space, and causality. And you must draw back from those things and witness them, because you are not in Maya. Maya is in you. So be done with it. So it was a quick way of taking what's illusory or what's apparent, what are the appearances of things, and taking them all back to their source in one fell swoop. You thought it was, then you unthink it and it's not anymore. That was one of the great Vedantic practices. You found very, very hard to find anything that resembles a practice in Vedanta. Yoga, yeah, that's all practice. See, other traditions, a lot of practices in them, meditation practices, this and that. But in Vedanta, you can't find any practices. There's just a declaration of what is. And then you meditate upon that, and the matter's over. It's solved. If I think it, it will be. If I unthink it, it will not be anymore. And then you're following the tract of the mind. The mind's natural course is to project and to withdraw, project, then withdraw, project, then withdraw. And it does this not only day to day, but it does this over ages. And it does this in terms of not just your daily thoughts and your waking and dreaming and deep sleep states, but it does this with whole entire worlds, not just worlds outside of you, like this earth and the billions of planets around you, but internal worlds, the kingdoms of heaven within, also are a matter of mental projection. So the mind is a very busy creature. That's why they like to try and still it. Everything here is vibrating. If you want to put it simply, if you don't have faith in God, love for God, belief in God, then the Indian seers, oh, that's all right, never mind, just think in terms of Om. Everything is just vibrating all the time, isn't it? Can anyone deny that? Nobody wants to go against the grain with the scientists nowadays. They're the wise savants on the scene. Science is the new religion. So even science has to admit then that everything is just vibrating. It's just that if in India you like to look for the origin of vibrations, the origin of things, and that's how they came to know that name, form, time, and space were all unreal, and coined that queen of all four-letter words for it, Maya, or samsara. Samsara was there in the Gita too, as you know. You've read Krishna's words. He mentions samsara. The Buddhists chose that word to explain the Kala Chakra, the wheel of birth and death and rebirth in ignorance. Can anyone else jump in at this point? Don't be shy. There we are. Jyoti is about to shine light on us, as is his name.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, everyone. I'm going to turn my video off to hopefully aid in the bandwidth. So your introduction caused me to think about one comment that I have, and then one question, I guess, that I have. And the comment was about when you were talking about Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, and Sri Sharda Devi, and kind of the Vishnu and Shiva aspects. And I was reading something in the gospel that kind of helped, in my mind, strengthen the connection of man as the machine and God as its operator, or man as the carriage and God as its driver. And it's when Sri Ramakrishna was talking to M, let's see. And, oh yeah, he said Chid Atma and Chid Shakti. The Purusha is Chid Atma and the Prakriti is Chit Shakti. Sri Krishna is the Chit Atma and Sri Radha is Chit Shakti. The devotees are so many forms of the Chit Shakti. They should think of themselves as companions or handmaids of the Chit Shakti, Sri Radha. This is the whole gist of the thing. And that kind of picture kind of helped me think about action, or what I should say, actionless action. Action coming from the Divine Mother, from Chit Shakti directly. And then the question I had was kind of in regards to, you were talking about being free of emotionalism or sentimentalism. And it seems in my past that I tend to get excited about things and show that excitement, if they're, good things or things that excite me, and then maybe get dejected or despondent when little troubles, whether things pop up. I've noticed now from a more witness standpoint that they don't hold so much sway over me, but sometimes I still see those tendencies want to pop up, or so I guess the question is to just hold true to that witness, and kind of see these things when they pop up and just let them dissolve on the spot, kind of, instead of acting them out, I guess would be the question. I hope I kind of got to a question there, but thank you, Babaji.
Yes, more than question and answer. This is just sort of a statement, and then maybe some further affirmation about a shobha, they call it. Shobha means non-emotionalism, and it's a mental posture that people can take whose minds get easily imbalanced by phenomena, by things that happen. Things come and they go. In fact, you reminded me of a conversation that Swami Nikhilananda had with our founder, Lex Hixon. Lex Hixon told me this once. He said, I was with Swami Nikhilananda in New York, and he was telling me about some things some events that were going to happen at the New York Vedanta Society soon. And Lex heard them, and he told Swami, well, Swami, I'm very excited about that. And Swami just turned and looked at him with a straight face and said, Lex, I never want you to use that word again. That's, of course, the word excitement. So we know this was Lex, of course, in his early 30s and maybe even late 20s. And he was an excitable person when he was younger. And it was contagious, too. He was excited about all the right things. There was certainly nothing really wrong with it. But that sthiti pragnasya that Krishna talks about in the Gita, this steady wisdom, a man or a woman of steady wisdom, is again a stance or a posture of the mind that one can assume to prepare themselves for all the changes that are going to happen. You could be very excited about an event coming along and then somebody not show up for it, or someone passes or dies, or the vehicle upon which the event's going to happen falls apart. And then you'd set yourself up for disappointment. So one just reaches that equanimous state, a state of equanimity. And then I think as I think it was Samanvaya there wrote me yesterday, right? He said there was one saint that just said, when anything happened, just said, oh, is that so? So he was accused of something. And so that he was innocent of, and he said, oh, is that so? So they threw him in jail, and he said to his jailers, oh, is that so? Then they let him out, and he goes, oh, is that so? So he just kept his one position the whole time of the changing phenomena that was going on, whether it was just or unjust, whether it was right or wrong, whether it was real or unreal. Just kept this one station of mind all the time. And that's what, of course, we're calling this witness consciousness. When it gets very mature, it's been tested, and there is no outer or reaction or even an inner reaction. One's just steady in that wisdom. Then you have that supreme intelligence called buddhi, or that Lord Buddha names himself after. Then that can settle into the body-mind mechanism and turn it into a divine thing. And then you've got everything as a divine play in front of you. And you're the spectator and the witness of it without getting pulled here and there, without getting dragged from birth to death, the soul, as Vivekananda said. So in this way is how I would answer you in that regard, is that it's a very good practice just to remain neutral, even-minded. And when those things come up again in terms of spiritual practice, because we know in spiritual practice, when you start doing the mantra, for instance, or when you start reading the truth in the Gita, like a truth that you haven't heard maybe all your life until you found your way to such great scriptures, we know that all of that brings up impurities hidden in the mind, like bubbles rising. And so in that case, then one's going to need to remain very steady in the face of reciting the mantra, because it's going to bring up some things that need to be purified, some past karmas. So that steadiness of mind is going to be the best thing in which to receive those unwanted intrusions of past karmas and their effects, or samskaras in the mind, impressions in the mind from past lifetimes. Sometimes they come out of nowhere and at the wrong time, at the worst of times. So that practice is going to stand you in good stead if you can remain even and neutral and measure them as they come towards you. There's one story again about Vivekananda, who was walking in a meadow here, I think here in the West or in England, and he had he was walking with one of the devotees who was a woman, and they jumped this fence evidently and got into this field, and this bull came at them. And it looked like it was going to lower its head and begin to run at them. So Vivekananda just stepped in front of the woman, and probably classic pose for him with his arms crossed and everything, just looking at this coming on. And so the bull just stopped in front of him and looked at him and walked away. That's because of his ahimsa, his nonviolence stance. He's a master of nonviolence, so animals will not sense any harm in him when they get close to him. And so the woman asked him afterwards, what were you thinking when the bull was running at you? And he said, well, I was just thinking of the bull, how big it is, how much it weighed, its mass. And then I was thinking of my body and how big it is, and wondering how far my body would fly if the bull hit me at the speed that it was running at me. So he was like doing a mathematical calculation in his mind, completely devoid of any kind of fear or anything, just seeing it evenly with his mind. So that's a story that's related in our tradition, that something that happened to him. So yes, that evenness of mind is very much coveted by all the great souls. They know it's the best way to deal with this life of changes. So many changes going on all the time. And you don't have to step far out your door or even go out your door these days with what the media is doing to know that the world outside is full of frightful changes, and people are reacting to them in all sorts of ways. And they've built a habit of reaction. So the yogi builds a habit of non-reaction. What is day to the all-cognizing sage is nighttime to the worldly person. And what is nighttime to the worldly person is daytime to the all-cognizing muni. So the yogi is always looking in the other direction at the opposite side of things and taking up a stance which is exactly the opposite of which most people walk. So in that way, they keep their minds even and their senses under control and their appetites under control and their mind balanced. And it's the best way to deal with the world, particularly as you see it today. And so they act as examples for that kind of life, a balanced life. If the 6 passions, lust, anger, greed, envy, pride, jealousy, and the 8 fetters, shame, grief, pride of caste, pride of lineage, so forth and so on, if those things come into your lifetime, then the best way to deal with them and to downsize them is by this equanimity of mind, not by reaction. That fans the flames.
Thank you, Babaji.
Sure. If one takes a stance like that, then you can see how the yogic yamas and niyamas all figure into that you would become nonviolent, you'd become non-covetous of people's goods. You wouldn't be going off taking people's goods away from them, like to other countries and so forth. And you would moderate all your appetites, brahmacharya and asteya, and practice aparigraha, non-receiving and non-giving, non-owning of things. You don't own anything. Everything belongs to the Lord. You're just its caretaker kind of idea. And all these things then play off of that evenness of mind. They grow and become strong in you off of that evenness of mind. So what to speak of excitement, I never want to hear you use that word again. Then you could take up words like, how about anticipation, or expectation. People have a lot of expectations, and when they get dashed, then of course they become depressed. Or they make appointments and people don't show up. So sometimes my brother told me, make no appointments, have no disappointments. So one maintains that evenness of mind. Sthiti pragnasya must be mentioned 4 or 5 times in the Bhagavad Gita by Sri Krishna. Few minutes left if there's a final word from you all. Otherwise, we can move on to our God blog session, which takes place in about an hour. I put up 5 what it was called juicy God blogs by some people this week. And we'll look into those and go a little deeper into the philosophy. The satsang here is just usually questions about one's daily sadhana and how to proceed on the path. We want to keep ourselves inspired so that we keep moving forward. If you take the Bhagavad Gita, people say, oh, the meaning of it is karma, or other people say, oh, the meaning of it is bhakti. But they asked Sri Ramakrishna what the overall meaning of the Gita was, and he said, it's what you get when you say Gita, 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 Gita. It turns into the word tagi, which means renunciation. Well, you could say the same thing about the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. What's the overall meaning of that? And you could probably search all its pages and find many great teachings, from soup to nuts, as they say, with that great manuscript. But basically, you could say it maybe just comes down to 2 words: go forward. Forward. Go forward on the path. Oma sato ma sadgamoya, tamaso ma joy kirgamoya, ritur ma amritam gimoya. Abir amayeti rudrayache dakshinam mukam. Tena mam pahi nityam. Om shanti shanti shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Tat Sat.